Eritrea lashes out at the UN's refugee agency. Asmara claims the organization has forcibly relocated some of its citizens stranded in Libya to Niger. But what would happen if they went back home? And is the country's unlimited national service a reason why many fled? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Rochelle Carey. In the past decade, thousands of Eritreans looking to improve their lives in Europe have become stranded in Libya. Detained during their illegal transit or rescued from drowning in the Mediterranean, refugees are sent to detention centers. But the battle for control of the capital, Tripoli, has left them exposed to the dangers of war and going days without food. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has intervened and relocated migrants to safer areas, while sending some to other countries. Among them, a group of 159 Eritrean nationals were sent to Niger before being relocated to a third country. And that has not gone down well with Eritrea's government. The Foreign Ministry summoned the UNHCR's representative to protest against the action. And the Minister of Information, Yaman Meskel, issued a statement on Twitter saying this: the UNHCR's latest act has no rationale or basis in law and amplifies its harmful eligibility guidelines, which require that is, urgent rectification. 50 Eritreans have returned home voluntarily from Libya in the past few weeks, while another 18 are scheduled to arrive. Before we get to our discussion, let's take a look back at the country of Eritrea. It was part of the larger Federation of Ethiopia until 1993. That year, Eritreans voted for independence and joined the United Nations, becoming Africa's newest state at the time. But by 1998, relations with Ethiopia soured, triggering a dispute over shared borders. That led to 2 years of conflict in which 100,000 people were killed. Years of fighting and instability have hurt Eritrea's agricultural economy, making it one of Africa's poorest nations. The United Nations estimates that hundreds of thousands have since fled for Europe, searching for a better life. Let's bring our guests now into the conversation. In London, Suleiman Hussein, chairman of Citizens for Democratic Rights in Eritrea, and in Nairobi, Fiseya Tekle, researcher for the Horn of Africa for Amnesty International. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. So, on what grounds is Eritrea making this demand that they say they want their citizens back? Suleiman?
Thank you. It is not entirely clear to me on what grounds the Eritrean government is making these demands. It is not necessarily a negative thing in itself, but the situation of these Eritreans did not suddenly come to the surface today. Eritreans have been in Libya for a number of years, more than 10 years, and the Eritrean government has been always silent about the suffering of the Eritrean citizens in Libya, in Sinai, and elsewhere in the Mediterranean. So this sudden interest in the lives of or the conditions of Eritrean citizens is not entirely clear to me, but I hope it is not just for the political consumption. And
to your recollection, have they ever done something like this before?
To my recollection, the Eritrean government has totally always ignored the exodus of the Eritrean youngsters. The Eritrean government knows perfectly why these youngsters are fleeing Eritrea. It's because of the high level of repression inside the country. It's because of the indefinite national service or the military service. It's because of the undeclared state of emergency that has been going on in Eritrea. It's because of all these things that a lot of more than 300, according to some estimates, of youngsters have left the country in the last 10 years. And this is the first time the Eritrean government has actually expressed interest in the conditions of the Eritreans. Even in Libya, a lot of Eritreans, like a couple of years ago, some were even slaughtered by ISIS. We didn't hear any act of condemnation. We didn't see any attempt from the Eritrean government trying to repatriate its citizens, when every other African country was showing interest to repatriate its own citizens. A lot of Eritreans were captured by the human traffickers. There is a lot of stories of rape, of rape and of ill treatment at the hands of gangsters in Libya, basically, or human traffickers. This is the first time the Eritrean government is showing this kind of interest. One can only guess why, but it's probably, I believe, probably due to the changes in the Horn of Africa.
Okay, if I could,
the Eritrean government probably is feeling.
Suleiman, if I can stop you right there, because I did want to pick up on that point in just a moment. But first, I want to put a similar question to Fisaya. Fisaya, what do you make of this interest that Eritrea is now expressing in its citizens that have fled?
Well, as Suleiman has already said, it's not clear why the government is doing this, is showing interest in the repatriation of Eritreans to the country at this particular time. But there were some instances where Eritrean refugees and asylum seekers have been returned. Before some time, before a month or two, some Eritreans were returned to Eritrea from Libya. But this is unprecedented. The government complaining against the United Nations organ for repatriating or for relocating Eritreans from Libya to Niger is something unprecedented. There may be so many speculations about that, but the government was not clear. One speculation is that the Eritrean government is trying to put itself or portray itself as a human rights organization or a human rights friendly state in the last one year. And as you may know, Eritrea has become a member of the Human Rights Council at UN, and they are promoting themselves as human rights friendly. So one expectation is that this act of condemning the UN High Commissioner for Refugees for relocating Eritreans from Libya to Niger is because of public advertisement or
public pressure,
trying to sell themselves as human rights friendly. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: so as we reported at the top of the show, some Eritreans are voluntarily returned home, but does Eritrea have a legal right to this demand that people be returned to them? I mean, I realize they're publicly pushing the issue, but do they legally have a leg to stand on, Fisaya?
Well, as international human rights standards and refugee law stands, any repatriation to country of origin should always be voluntary. So it's not the consideration of the state of origin which matters. It is not the concern of the state of the country of origin that matters. It is the voluntary, the consent of the people to be returned. So even if Eritrea has complained right now that these people should be returned, what the UN Refugee Commission follows or should follow always is the consent of the people.
Okay. Suleiman, what will happen to these people that have returned? What do you believe they face when they get back to Eritrea?
There is a history. I think it would be important to remind ourselves of some basic factors. In 2002, Eritreans were deported forcibly, Eritrean migrants or asylum seekers from Malta. And the Amnesty International has reported that they have been kept incommunicado and suffered systematic torture. And there also been instances where some Eritrean refugees were deported from Egypt. The same fate. Many of them actually died. Some of them made it to leave the country again. So the history of repatriation or forced repatriation to Eritrea is not in favor of the Eritrean government. What I believe the Eritrean government should do rather now is to change the conditions that led to these people fleeing the country, because we seem to forget that these are not some sort of economic migrants. These are people who fled the country because of human rights violation, because of the open-ended national service, because of the repressive policies of the government in Eritrea. Now, if the situation back home changes, I believe many of them would voluntarily go back to Eritrea without even the government demanding it. But as to the blame game between the UNHCR and the Eritrean government, I'm not sure why is it. One of speculation could be what Fisaha just said, because he's now a member of the Human Rights Council. But we also know that in the early 90s, when Eritrea won its independence, we had more than 500,000 Eritrean refugees, and they were not repatriated to Eritrea, although they expressed interest to go back to their home areas. But they were the majority of them are still refugees in Sudan because there was some sort of disagreement between the government of Eritrea and the UNHCR.
I want to bring someone else into the conversation now. Mary Roger Beloa, Chief Executive Officer of MBR Networks. It's a media company. We appreciate you coming into this conversation. And the question that I want to put to you is, there are reports that some of the new recruits to Eritrea's national service have been told that in the future they will only be asked to serve 18 months as opposed to this unlimited time where they've really been giving up their lives, which is a reason a lot of them have been fleeing. That's not official yet, but do you think that that is a possibility, that that is something that could change in the country?
Well, you know, it sounds to be a betterment vis-à-vis the current situation. But Eritrea is going through a very special time. Since it opened up a little bit by signing a peace agreement with Ethiopia. So there's a feeling that things should change faster and more thoroughly. And so sometimes some kind of reforms are not enough anymore. People really want transformation. They want really things to change totally. So I don't think, we still see people fleeing, and because the system had not changed really, and that's what people expect. There was a lot of hope that the peace agreement with Ethiopia will contribute to internal change. But so far, people are sitting on the fence and waiting.
Why was that opportunity not seized, that moment of hope, that glimmer of hope that people had? Why did that not change in Eritrea?
Well, it won't change so quickly, so easily. You know, that was a very weird system. Eritrea, we know of dictatorial system all over Africa. We know of authoritarian systems. We know of system where the constitution is not running, where really, but the kind of system where you have a draft, young people spending like 20 years in a national service, like people paying taxes on their salary even while abroad, if they want to maintain sort of a good relationship with the country. You know, the kind of things which happened there are just unprecedented. You don't see that everywhere. And where you have a head of state who never goes out practically, you don't see him at the UN, at the African Union summits. Really, a very secretive country. Is very special. So they have built up a system which will probably change, because, you know, you never know when you are sort of a frozen country and something happens, like a little opening up, you know, you don't know how far it can go. So we are, and nothing is impossible. As soon as you start change, maybe it can create sort of a dynamic where it goes faster than what you wanted, or it goes deeper than what you intended in the first place. But now is only a few months into the change.
Yes,
agreement with Ethiopia. In the geopolitics, it had changed a lot, and the feeling is different this way. But internally, it's more difficult to change.
Fasea, let me bring you into this. If in fact this unlimited national service, if there were a limit that were going to be put on it, perhaps this 18 months that some recruits say they have been told, would that be a fundamental shift, a fundamental change in the way things work in Eritrea? Could that be a corner turned in some way?
Yes, limiting the indefinite nature of national service in Eritrea can be a good place to start for a reform in Eritrea. One is that it affected a whole generation of Eritreans since 1990s, the end of 1990s. The youth has been serving or fleeing Eritrea because of the national service. And so limiting the indefinite term of the national service as provided in the National Service Proclamation is the best place to start. But that is not the end of reforms in Eritrea. There are people who have been in detention since 2001 for voicing their concern about the way things are running, the way the politics is being run by the president in Eritrea. We call them the G15, 11 of them. So they called for reform. They asked for the Eritrean constitution to be implemented, but the response from the government was that they have been arrested together with some other.
To say, are you talking about when things started to slip in 2001?
Yes, people have been imprisoned since 2001. Veteran politicians and journalists, religious leaders, they have been imprisoned for a long time, and they have been held incommunicado, and they have not been sentenced to prison by any court. So it's right now we don't know if they are alive or not. So given this situation, in addition to limiting the indefinite nature of the national service in Eritrea, the government has to release these people, or if they have faced any other kind of fate, they have to disclose what happened to them.
Okay.
And in addition to that, there are so many people who have been in prison for a long time, in addition to those high-profile people. So those people have to be released also.
Okay, and to that point, it's difficult, as you all know, to actually get firm numbers on that. But there are some international organizations that say that there may be as many as 14,000 people in military prisons alone. Suleiman, does Eritrea actually face any external pressure to change anything?
I'm not sure of the external pressure, but there is a lot of internal pressure building up as we speak now. The indefinite national service, the only justification given by the Eritrean authorities so far was the no war, no peace situation between Eritrea and Ethiopia, and that war can come again at any time, that Ethiopia, which is the huge, large country to the south, is a threat to the national security of Eritrea. And the government was saying that's why it needed to keep those youngsters in an indefinite manner. Now, once this situation has come happily to an end, and Eritrea and Ethiopia are no more at war, but rather they seem to be friends now, and that Eritrea is not suffering the international sanctions anymore. The public, including those who are in support of the government, are putting a lot of pressure, even from the ranks of the Eritrean government itself, that Eritrea needs, without any further delay, to come to normalcy, to implement constitution, to implement basic rule of law, and to integrate into the international community once again, and to accept the people of Eritrea as citizens who have the rights and have the right to have a say in the running of the country.
Okay.
Basically, the political situation in Eritrea has to come to an end.
Okay. Mary Roger Below, I'm going to let you have the last word on this. You said a moment ago that there was hope, right? What do you think the turning point could be for there to be change in Eritrea? As you mentioned, there was hope that perhaps sort of normalizing relations with Ethiopia could be the difference. What do you think the difference can be?
You mentioned about the external pressure. I don't believe in it at all, because we see how Eritrea could withstand pressure for 4 decades. So that's not a point. I think what the external world could do is to acknowledge every positive step they are doing, and really to make change attractive. And I think there is an emulation from Ethiopia, which has been improving the relationship, doing bold moves towards Eritrea, towards opposition, towards, internal peace. And you see how the international community reacts to that. I think that's the kind of interaction it could do with Eritrea, like this thing with the draft being limited, restricted to 18 months, like even how they accepted to end war and to make peace with Ethiopia. I think internally it will help them, let's say, release the the grip on the system. This repression, which has been now a second habit. I think this positive look at Eritrea and encouraging the leaders to change and say, yes, you are on the right path, and if you do so, we are willing to help, and
so
we
you're
don't
saying
want to boycott or show that you are bad people, but we really want to help, and you are yourself, you are making the positive
So you're saying
step,
basically
and
some
the
sort
change
of
should come from you.
So you're saying.
I think.
So you're saying basically.
That's the way forward.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Marie Roger Beloa, and thank you to all of our guests for joining us, Suleiman Hussein, Visaya Tekle, and Marie Roger Beloa. And thank you for watching as well. You can see the program again anytime if you visit our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Rochelle Carey, and the entire team. Bye for now.